Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we are very happy to meet again on the Islamic Notes channel, where we together bring Islamic values to life through stories that are full of meaning and life lessons. Every story we present is not just entertainment, but also a reminder that in every test there is a hidden blessing. In every step, there is an opportunity to get closer to Allah. These stories teach us to remain patient, steadfast in goodness, and always be grateful for every provision of His. Don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the stories full of wisdom that we present regularly. Support from all friends means a lot to us to continue presenting useful and inspiring Islamic content. Let's start the story. A philosophy professor from America. For decades, he has been immersed in the theories of Plato, Kant, and Nietzsche. He studied logic, taught existentialism, and laughed at religion. But that day, a verse from the Quran stopped his logical steps. The Quran is deeper than any philosophy book I've ever read, he said. This is not a fairy tale. This is a true story, the story of how reason finds faith and a philosopher bows before God. Watch this video until the end, because maybe, like Dr. Keller, you are not looking for religion, but are looking for the truth. And who knows, the Quran will also speak directly to you. His name is Dr. Jonathan Keller. He is not an ordinary person, a professor of philosophy at one of the leading universities in Boston, United States, with a PhD and dozens of scientific journals that he has written. Keller is known as a sharp thinker who is not easily trapped in old beliefs. He teaches courses on formal logic, moral philosophy, existentialism, and modern Western thought. Names like Plato, Kant, Nietzsche, and Sartre seem to have become part of his daily life. In the classroom, he often said, "Religion is a human attempt to find meaning, but philosophy is a way to test all claims to truth." For some students, Dr. Keller was an intellectual inspiration, but for the religious, he was like a hammer that destroyed beliefs. Keller never hid his views. He did not believe in God, nor was he hostile to religion. He just felt he did not need it. For him, reason was enough. Logic was enough. Every time he discussed a topic like the existence of God, he always gave a sharp conclusion. If God exists, then let him pass the test of logic. But so far, no one has succeeded in making me believe. However, behind all that intellectual brilliance, there was one side that he hid: emptiness. Not because he was unachieving, not because he lacked recognition, but because he felt like he was going around in a maze of questions without ever finding a single door to a complete answer. He once wrote in his personal notes, "Why do I read so many books but never feel enough? What will happen when I die? Is it all just a meaningless dream?" No one knew that the logic teacher was tired of his own thoughts, and he did not know that soon he would find a book that would not only silence his questions, but also answer them. Every week, Dr. Jonathan Keller spent hours in his study. His bookshelves were filled with thick works: Critique of Pure Reason, Being in Time, Beyond Good and Evil, and hundreds more. He read, took notes, thought, and continued to ask questions. However, behind his scientific routine, something slowly grew: boredom. The more he read, the more contradictions he found. Plato talked about the world of ideas. Aristotle denied it. Kant tried to bridge reason and morality. Nietzsche came and destroyed it. Sartre said life is absurd. Camus said we must create our own meaning. Keller began to feel that Western philosophy was not uniting, but dividing reality. Even the most basic questions, such as, why do humans live? Or, what happens after death? Logically, never had a single definite answer. He admitted in his heart, philosophy teaches us to think, but never really teaches us to live. One night, in the midst of his fatigue preparing lecture materials, he wrote a sentence in his journal: "If all the great thinkers contradict each other, who should I really believe?" He felt lost. It was as if he had been climbing a high mountain, but the peak was never there. Only fog and more questions. And at that moment, he began to doubt something he had always been proud of: human reason. How could something that was said to be the most noble, logic, not be able to give him peace? And it was precisely at that point of saturation that a small door began to open. Not from a philosophy book, not from an academic discussion, but from a female student in his class, a Muslim girl who would ask him a question he never expected. That day, the philosophy of religion class went on as usual. The topic, arguments for the existence of God. Dr. Keller wrote 3 names on the board: Anselm, Aquinas, and Descartes. He explained the logic behind the cosmological, ontological, and moral arguments, ending with a sharp critique of David Hume and Nietzsche. A conclusion he liked because it showed that belief in God was not necessarily rational. But suddenly, from the second row, a hand went up. Not a philosophy student, but a student from another major. She wore a hijab. Her name was Layla. The room suddenly became quiet. Layla said quietly but firmly, "Professor, you say philosophy seeks truth, but why have you never quoted the Quran in this study? Why have you never considered that truth can come not only from logic, but from revelation?" Keller looked at him, a little surprised, not because the question was rude, but because he was honest. He answered in his usual style, "Because revelation is a personal claim. Philosophy cannot accept authority without rational proof." Layla did not back down. She continued, "But Professor, what if revelation itself challenges humans to think and reflect logically? Isn't that what you teach? To dare to test all ideas without prejudice?" Keller fell silent. The class was silent. A few students looked at each other, and for the first time in years of teaching, Dr. Keller did not immediately deny it. He simply replied, "I have never read the Quran seriously. Maybe it's time." That night she opened her laptop, typed, "Quran Translation English PDF." She downloaded the translation without any intention, without expectations. But the first page she read changed her mind. The verse said, "This is the book about which there is no doubt, a guidance for those conscious of Allah." Meaning, this is the book about which there is no doubt, a guidance for those who are pious. QS Al-Baqarah 2. She reread it again and again. There was a tone of conviction that she had never encountered in any philosophy book. Not discourse, but a statement. Not an assumption, but a truth offered directly. And for the first time, Dr. Keller felt the urge to keep reading. Since that night, the Quran became Dr. Keller's regular reading. At first, he read skeptically, like when studying classical manuscripts. He looked for contradictions. He wanted to find weaknesses in arguments. But strangely, the more he read, the more he felt stripped. Every verse seemed to speak directly to him, not in high philosophical language, but in deep language that touched the point he hid the most, his soul. One night he read a verse in the Islamic chapter. "Whoever Allah wills to be guided, he will open his chest to accept Islam." QS Al-An'am 125. He stopped reading. His eyes stared blankly at the screen. There was something in that sentence that made him pause. Opening his chest, accepting Islam. "Why do I feel like this is about me?" he muttered. He couldn't explain it logically, but he knew there was a vibration in him that he had never experienced when reading philosophy books. Usually when reading Nietzsche or Sartre, he felt amazed. But when reading the Quran, he felt known. Even more than that, as if someone was guiding him out of the darkness. He continued reading the Al-Ikhlas chapter, which was only 4 verses, but it hit all the concepts of God that he had ever learned. Say, He is God, the Almighty. God is the place where everything depends. He does not beget and is not begotten, and there is nothing equal to Him. There is no philosophical poem as powerful as this, he thought. There is no definition of divinity as dense as this. Simple but deep, concise but undeniable. Keller took a deep breath, then he whispered as if admitting for the first time, "This is not just reading. This is like a voice from a place far away, but very close." And from that night on, he stopped looking for mistakes. Instead, he began searching for the truth. When philosophy meets prophecy. Chapter 5 will take us to the moment when Dr. Keller began to compare Western philosophers with the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad and began to see something he had previously overlooked. Dr. Keller slowly closed his laptop. On the table there were thick books. Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Critique of Pure Reason, Being and Nothingness. 3 decades of his life had been based on the thoughts of these philosophers, but now one small book from the Middle East began to shake everything. Keller took his notebook. He made 2 large columns: Western philosophy versus the teachings of the Quran, not to seek victory or defeat, but because he began to see a surprising contrast. He wrote, Nietzsche, God is dead. We must create our own values. The Quran, God is alive. Values come from him, not from human desires. Sartre, life has no meaning except that which we create ourselves. The Quran, life is a test. Its meaning has been embedded since the beginning of creation. Plato, truth can only be achieved through the world of ideas. The Quran, truth is real and is revealed in the form of revelation. However, what made him most speechless was one figure, the Prophet Muhammad. Keller had often heard about him, but now he read in a different way. He witnessed how an illiterate person from the Arabian desert, without weapons, without a system, without classical education, was able to bring civilization from darkness to light. If he was just an ordinary leader, how could he change the world? If this is all just fiction, why do I feel my soul calm reading it? He read more deeply about the Sirah Nabawiyah, about the Prophet's patience when insulted, about his forgiveness of his enemies, about his loyalty, compassion, and consistent justice. Keller closed the book and said to himself, Nietzsche taught me the courage to fight dogma, but Muhammad taught me the courage to submit to the truth. That night he wrote a sentence that surprised even himself. I used to think philosophy was depth, but now I know true depth is in the Quran and the life of Muhammad. That morning, Dr. Keller sat alone in his office. The Boston sky was overcast. Light rain dampened the window. In front of him, a translated copy of the Quran was open. He skimmed through the verses as usual, but his eyes stopped on a short chapter, Surah Ad-Duha. He had never read a chapter that short, yet so powerful. Slowly he read, By the time of Duha, and by the night when it is silent, your Lord has not forsaken you nor hates you. Keller was silent. The sentence, Your Lord has not forsaken you, as if it was addressed directly to him. All this time he felt like he was living in the shadow of unanswered questions, in a classroom full of discussion, but empty of love. Then came the next sentence, And indeed, the end is better for you than the beginning. And indeed, your Lord will give you, and you will be pleased. Unconsciously, his eyes began to moisten. His tears fell, and he could not hold them back. This was not just the beauty of language. This was like a hug from something he had rejected all this time, but secretly he longed for. The next verse hit his heart. Did he not find you orphans? Then he protected you, and he found you confused. Then he guided you. QS Ad-Duha, 6-7. Keller closed his mushaf. He lowered his head, sobbed. God, are you really still waiting for me? After all this arrogance? That was the first night, Doctor. Keller prayed, not with complicated religious readings, but with just one soft sentence. If you really exist, then guide me. Show me your way. For the first time, he did not want to prove the truth. He only wanted to be found by the truth itself. That day, the atmosphere of the Cambridge Islamic Center Mosque was so quiet. In the corner of the room stood a white man in a gray suit. His face was calm, but his eyes seemed to tremble. He was Dr. Jonathan Keller, the philosopher who used to believe that truth belongs only to logic. 2 weeks earlier, he had secretly come to the mosque. He asked, listened, and discussed with a young imam. He didn't want to rush, but the more he studied, the more his heart led to one point. Islam does not reject logic, he said. Islam goes beyond logic. It fills the empty space that philosophy cannot reach. Finally, the day came. In front of the imam and several congregants, Dr. Keller bowed his head. In a low voice but full of conviction, he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Tears broke out in the room. A man who used to call religion a dogma now took the Shahada calmly, not because he gave up, but because he finally understood. After the Shahada, he knelt down. His hands covered his face. His tears fell again, but this time not because of confusion, but because of peace. He whispered, "All this time I felt logic was the highest God, but today I know, even reason needs to prostrate." A congregation approached him and hugged him warmly. The imam of the mosque patted his shoulder and said, "Welcome, my brother. Today you are reborn." That day, Jonathan Keller's name changed. He chose a new name, Yunus, because like the prophet Yunus, he felt he had been trapped in the belly of a fish, the vast but dark world of philosophy, and now he has come out into the light. 2 years have passed since Dr. Jonathan Keller, now Yunus Keller, said the Shahada. In the past, he was a skeptical philosophy professor, proud of logic and cold to revelation. Now he is still a thinker, still reading, still writing, but something has changed, his direction and his heart. Yunus did not abandon philosophy. Instead, he united it with faith. He began writing a new journal and book. This time it was titled, "When Reason Prostrates, Finding God in a World Full of Arguments." He gave a seminar not to destroy religion as before, but to show that reason never contradicts Islam. The only thing that contradicts it is the arrogance of reason. He quoted a verse of the Quran that he now always uses as the opening of every lecture. "Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, in the alternation of night and day, there are signs for men of understanding." QS. Ainani Imran 190. Yunus told his students, "Islam is not the enemy of reason. Islam is the home of reason and the light of the heart." Now every morning he starts the day with prayer. Every night he closes the day with dhikr. And in the midst of all that, he still thinks, but this time in a state of prostration. In one of his most famous lectures to the Harvard Muslim Students Association, Yunus said, "I have been trying to turn the pages of philosophy books to find answers, but it turns out that what brought me home was not logic itself, but the guidance of the Quran, which is deeper than all Western philosophy." If you feel that you have tired of looking for answers in all human theories and thoughts, try opening the Quran, not to become a religious person, but to know who you are and who your God is. Because maybe, like Dr. Keller, what you are looking for is not a new answer, but the voice of truth that has been waiting for you from the beginning.